Hi, everybody. Welcome to this edition of What's Next Live. And I have the fantastic, awesome, incredible pleasure to welcome my friend Roger Martin to the show. Roger, welcome.
It is great to be back, Tiffany. Thank you for having me.
Yes. And the fun part about this is Roger was my very first video live interview like 3 years ago. And we were both in this little screen and it was really grainy and the sound was terrible. And I feel like we've matured into a much more virtual presentation mode.
Yes, we haven't grown older. We've just matured.
We've matured. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I just want to say thank you for those of you who know anything about my career. Roger Martin was one of the very first champions that I had when I was pursuing the Thinkers 50. He helped me with that, as well as getting me to the Drucker Forum, which is happening later this year, 2 bucket list items for myself. Yeah. As well, he's just been a great mentor and friend. So I was so thrilled that I heard you had a new book coming out, When More Is Not Better. And he was kind enough to reach out to say, hey, can I come back on your show? And I was like, well, you had me at hello, right, Roger? It's really easy. So maybe for those that are watching for the first time across the multiple platforms we're on, maybe give a little bit about who is Roger Martin.
Well, I've had a varied career. So I started out as a strategy consultant, one of the crazy people who thought the world needed another strategy firm and built Monitor Company. Then I got talked into returning to my home, which is Canada, to become the dean of the business school there at the University of Toronto called the Rotman School of Management. And I did that for 15 years. And throughout the whole period, I've been writing books. This is my 12th. I've now retired from being dean and a business school so that I can spend more time doing what I love most, which is writing and advising CEOs on strategy and other things. So that's a little bit about me. But I love seeing people like you, Tiffany, enter the world of ideas. We need good people doing that, contributing their ideas. So I just loved it. When I met you and heard about what you're up to, I loved it, and that's why I'm delighted to offer whatever support I can.
Oh, well, it doesn't go unnoticed. Trust me, my friend. Thank you. So let's dig into the book, When More Is Not Better. It's like, what a great title, right? Because I think we are in such a more is better consumption kind of world right now. And maybe just step us through, what was the genesis of you coming up with More is Not Better? Because I think the timing is oddly perfect.
Yes.
In so many ways. Like, you had a little crystal ball, Roger. That's why I like you. So tell us about how this kind of came to fruition.
Sure. So it started out, so the early work in the book was in 2013. I actually started this research project that the book is the result of. And at that time, I was worried about the stagnation of median family income in America. And so what made America such an economic power was for 200 years, the median family, the average family in America advanced economically 90 or 95% of the years. There are a few down periods like the Long Depression and the Great Depression, but by and large, that's what happened. And I saw that slowing down and just wondered, I wanted to know, was it systemic? Was it just a short-term thing and it was going to come back? Or was this something had changed and we had to figure that out? And I, with my colleagues, did a whole bunch of work on it, and then came to this intersection with complexity theory, and it's somewhat obscure, but a fellow named Bill McKelvey, who is now retired, but a UCLA Anderson business professor, had taken it and applied it to business in an interesting way, and came to this conclusion that when you take a normal distribution, right, so a bell-shaped distribution, and apply more and more pressure on it, it can turn into a Pareto distribution, the 80-20 kind of distribution. And so that's where the insight came from. It's, I wonder, the distribution of income and wealth in the US is getting more Pareto and less bell-shaped, less Gaussian, right? The middle class is stagnating, if not getting kind of smaller. Could this be from excess pressure that's taking something that worked one way and making it into something that works another way? And that was about 4 years into the study, and it's to me, it's a nice illustration of the serendipity of research, which is I was researching one thing kind of that was mysterious and came across another body of research. And when you put the two together, the mystery became increasingly less mysterious and more obvious what was going on.
Well, and I think you could apply that same thing to business, right? It's not just in the socioeconomic and sort of human side of this, but on the business side. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've heard in a business meeting, it's kind of the 80-20 rule. 80% of our revenue comes from 20% of our customers, right? And then you could actually say, well, anything, right? The 1%ers and then the 99%ers and then whatever it might be, right? And so and even for myself, I would love to hear you describe the 80-20 rule, because I think many people use it, but don't actually understand, well, what does that really mean?
Sure. Well, it comes from a fellow named Wilfredo Pareto, who at the tail end of the 19th century made an observation that 20% of Italian families own 80% of the land in Italy. And that's why it became called the 80-20 rule. And people use different terminologies, power laws and the like. But essentially, you get these kind of distributions when an effect is the cause of more of that same effect. So think about Instagram. So the median Instagram person on Instagram has about 150 followers. The number one followed person on Instagram, last time I checked, it was Cristiano Ronaldo, the soccer player, with about 218 million followers. The followership on Instagram is Pareto distributed. So you've got this long tail that goes out to 218 million, as opposed to a normal distribution. The height of adult males is normally distributed. And so the tallest male is less than twice as tall as the median male. In Instagram followership, right, the most followed is 1 million times more followed more than a median person. So that's when they talk about the long tail, that's the long tail. The tail keeps getting longer and longer. And it's because the effect, so how do you choose who to follow on Instagram? You check how many followers they have. So the effect, having followers, is the cause of still more of that effect, right? And you get this extension. And in business, right, winning business that somebody else loses makes you stronger and enables you to grow faster than that other company. And it gets Pareto distributed. Wealth. What's the best way to make money? Have money. the old adage. And so those, when you have a situation where an effect is the cause of more of the effect, you get this kind of distribution. And that comes when you have more competitively intense environments, when there's so much pressure on the environment for efficiency, you get those more so. When there's a little bit less, you get something that's more normally distributed.
And so do you think, and that was fantastic. So I just want to pause for a second and say, we've got people visiting us today so thank you everybody for telling us. We got Ottawa, Canada, of course, because Roger's Canadian.
Yes.
We've got London and Delaware and Denver and Italy and Switzerland. So fantastic. So please put your questions for Roger below and I'll make sure I get them to him. But
I'm glad we have an Italian. I'm glad we have somebody from Italy because that's
of course. I'm a global trotter, right? So this is my way. I feel like I still get to travel is vicariously through the little chat function on these live
Yes,
events,
indeed.
right?
Yes, indeed.
But so what you just said, there was a couple of things. One was, well, the decision you make is how many followers do you have? So then you're going to follow, or how many does that person have? Or, if you're going to make money, you need to have money. That I understand that some of it is the metric or the thing we value in that metric that makes us make certain decisions. And so did something come out of this that maybe some managers are looking at the wrong sort of predictors or the wrong metrics in order to change the behavior from the 80-20?
Well, absolutely. I mean, one kind of big problem is this thing I called surrogation, right? Which is when a goal gets translated into a measure, and then you forget what the goal was, and the measure becomes the goal itself.
Right.
This is the Wells Fargo thing, as we all know. They defined the closeness of a customer relationship as how many accounts the customer had. And so they created these incentive systems and punishments systems around having more accounts per customer. And in due course, people in the branches just started opening accounts. Tiffany Bova got another credit card that she never actually applied for.
I used that example in my book, actually.
Yeah. That's right. You did. That's right.
And the name of that effort, by the way, was GREAT.
Really?
So it was the 8 different accounts. So talk about make it really positive. Like, let's call it GREAT. And it was GR and then the word 8. Right? Yeah. And it just changed the behavior.
Yeah, but it is this thing called, it's a cool concept, not invented by me, but invented by somebody else, called surrogation. So the measure how many accounts becomes the thing itself, when all it ever was one measure of that thing. And so one of the things I say in the book is that managers can do better by having multiple, often contradictory measurements, right? So I like Southwest Airlines as an example of this. They not only want to be the lowest cost airline, but the best airline for both customer service and employee satisfaction, right? So you can't do simplistic things to an extreme to get one of those, right? The best way you could imagine right off the top, the best way to get lower cost is to pay employees less. But then you'll have unhappy employees, and you will have failed on that goal. So instead, you're kind of forced to be creative and say, well, how could we have happy employees and low costs? Well, how about we create an airline where we need fewer employees to do the same things as others, because we simplify those tasks. We have one kind of airplane, so that switching back and forth between types of airlines is not there. So what they actually do is pay their employees more than their competitors, because they can use them more effectively in a more effective system. So that kind of getting away from the one single goal is helpful.
Yeah, and I think that lends itself to the efficiency conversation, right? I mean, I think I'm not a fan of cutting costs to find growth. I understand if you're inefficient and there's fat on the bone, like how can you improve that? But how do you balance efficiency today? Because I think a lot of people listening, whether you're an individual contributor, a manager, or a CEO, big leader, it's all this efficiency conversation on one side. But on the other side, it's about resiliency. So you're like, well, do I invest for tomorrow today to take advantage of some of my competitors maybe pulling back and cutting costs and getting more efficient? Or do I double down and figure out how do I build a much more resilient company while at the same time getting more efficient? And I think that's really difficult. So maybe I'm guessing you've got some thoughts there.
Sure. No, it is. It's harder, right? I mean, that's again why I think we've gotten to where we've gotten, which is this notion of, it's easier to have one goal, and then everybody aligns towards that goal. But it turns out that often gets you in trouble. And so I think part of it is just recognizing that you do actually have to do the harder thing, which is to say, I need to not pursue efficiency for efficiency's sake.
Right.
You need to pursue efficiency for some end, right? That matters, right? That would matter to the long-term viability of your organization. So if you just say, I just want to be as efficient as possible, chop, 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 and then all the customers go away, then you don't have a resilient fit for the future organization. Now, if you don't pay any attention whatsoever and you have costs completely out of control, the customers will go away because you're going to have to charge them too much. But here's where I like Costco, right? Costco knows, just like every other retailer, how many people you have to have on the store floor to serve a given amount of customers. And so they calculate that, and their competitors calculate that. And then Costco just adds a slush factor, right? They just say, we're just going to have more, right? Not twice as many, but 15 or 20% more.
Right.
And then our customers are going to say, man, I love this place.
Right.
Because I can always get somebody to help me, and that person won't be rushed off to the next person, and they'll make me feel like a valued customer, because guess what? I am a valued customer. And so I like that kind of thinking, which says we have to understand what efficiency is, right? But then don't obsessively pursue it, right? Figure out what amount of that efficiency is good and when more is no longer better, because efficiency is not in and of itself a goal. It is an enabler of a goal. And in the case of Costco, the goal is we want customers to get great value and love us more than anybody else. And they've accomplished that, and hooray, look how successful they are.
Absolutely. And I think that the thing that was interesting in everything you just said was the connection between, the employees don't feel like they're underserving customers, right? Like they don't want to show up to work and be like, there's no one on the floor, I'm pulled in 100 directions, that there's enough people to serve the customers, because that's what's important, right? The customers feel like they're getting, even though it's a discount store, right? Or a warehouse store, they're getting a really high touch experience when they're there. You know exactly what you're going to get every time you go in there. And that CEO would walk the floor of a Costco every day of the week, almost until he retired, right?
Yes, absolutely. Jim Senegal, absolutely. And also other wonderful things, like almost all managers started on the floor, right? So it's virtually all promote from within. And so the company's saying, if you would dedicate your career to us, we're going to dedicate ourselves to making it a great career for you. Minimum wage laws are completely irrelevant to Costco. There's nobody who makes anywhere close to that little money. Not even in the ballpark. And others would say, oh, well, you can't be an efficient retailer if you're paying above minimum wage, and they will fight hard to keep minimum wage laws down. And Costco is like, minimum wage is not a factor on our entire landscape. We don't know about it. We don't care. We pay here because we have this sense of we need to balance efficiency and resilience.
Well, and not only that, I'm going to weave in another topic, right? Which is, as the CEO of the company I work for, Salesforce, Mark Benioff says, business is the greatest platform for change, right? And doing well by doing good, and purpose over profit. And the Business Roundtable is a great example of CEOs getting together to try to rethink this sort of capitalistic, at all costs, like don't pay our people more money, get more efficient. It's all in that almighty dollar. And how have you, especially in light of everything that's going on, how have you seen, because the book was obviously long finished before this sort of happened, is how have you been rethinking the frame of when more is not better, based on what I just said and the changes from the Business Roundtable around this conversation? What have you sort of come up with?
Sure. Well, a couple of things. One, I know this is not an advertisement for Salesforce or Mark Benioff, but he exemplifies the notion that you can pursue multiple objectives. In fact, you need to pursue multiple objectives, and I'm glad he's as vociferous on the subject as he is, because there has been a relatively long tradition that dates back to Milton Friedman in his famous "The Business of Business is Business" New York Times article in 1970, and Mike Jensen later on in 1976, that argued that you must have one objective function. You've got to have that, or life as we know it's going to end, cats and dogs sleeping together, whatever. It's sort of like it's all going to go off the rails if we don't do that. And so I do think you need voices like Mark's, which just say, come on, really? No, that's dumb. And so that's good leadership. I mean, I like what the Business Roundtable said, but I'm a bit of a critic of it. Like,
all right.
My view on people and life is that if a person doesn't have a tool for doing something, they won't do it at all, right? So there was very little options trading, right, before Fisher Black and Myron Scholes came up with the Black-Scholes option pricing theorem. And then suddenly everybody could figure out what an option was worth, and trading went through the roof. There's now trillions of dollars of options traded every day because they have a tool, right? Right? People didn't advertise online until a little company called Google came up with a tool for telling you whether it was worth a damn or not. Right?
Right.
Like, we'll tell you if there was a click. And then suddenly people said, oh my God, I have a tool for determining whether or not the dollars I paid Google were worthwhile or not, because I can figure out myself what a click is worth to me, my company.
Right.
So I believe that things are not going to change on this front of sort of having multiple goals and not just this sort of kind of singular focus on shareholder value maximization until there are tools. And I said that the day that the new statement came out, and I haven't seen anything on that front from the Business Roundtable. And there are all sorts of people out there doing good things. I talk about one in the book, Zainab Khan and the Good Jobs Strategy and the Good Jobs Institute. Well, it's got a methodology for paying workers more and earning more. B Corp, B Lab has got the B Corp certificate. There's a bunch of people, various people have environmental footprint measurements, the science-based targets initiative. The Business Roundtable should be saying to its members, we stand behind this set of tools. We're gonna say these tools are tools that that we stand behind.
And it could also not only be tools, right? It could also be, because something came out a few weeks ago on what they've learned, and that was one of the biggest complaints. There was kind of if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. Do we know if it's even being successful? Is it just words? Like, what is the management that goes, or the measurement, that goes behind it? So I agree, it's the tools, and it's also the, maybe it's aligning to the SDGs from the UN, right? And saying, how are we doing as companies against those 17 SDGs? I don't know. What is the mix up of the equality of pay and whatever it might be, right? But I think it speaks leaps and bounds to the power of, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, right? But I hate using that term because it's so cliche, but I think it works here.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to it. I mean, I think people can be too doctrinaire about that, saying it has to be measured in some really quantitative way. I think you can also measure things in somewhat more qualitative ways. Just like ethnographic research, I think is often as powerful or more powerful than highly quantitative research. And some people say, well, yes, but you don't have a statistically significant sample, so that doesn't mean anything. Not true. It means a lot. But you're right. I mean, again, it's to me, all of that is part of what I think of as a tool, right? In the case of Google Google, it literally was
Yes.
a measurement tool. Their entire the $1 trillion market cap of that company is based on giving customers a tool for something they didn't have before.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely. Well, we've got a question here from Stefano Papini, and you got it, Stefano. You got to tell us if you're joining us from Italy, because really, that's an awesome name. So,
Yes,
do you
yes.
think capitalism? Do you think capitalism should evolve in the next future? If yes, how?
Yes, I think it needs to. I think it needs to evolve in a way that puts as much of a premium on resilience as on efficiency, and I think it's got to evolve in a way that is consistent with a complex adaptive system. So right now we have capitalism managed by governments. So let's say the U.S. is managed by the U.S. government, Congress, and they have a view, this fundamental view of the economy as a machine, and so you can figure out what perfect looks like and pass legislation that will get you to the perfection that you want, right? Well, that's completely fallacious notion. There is no perfect to be sought. There's just better. And so I think what we need is capitalism that we recognize it's an adaptive system where whatever we do will get gamed when we put it in place, right? And therefore we have to keep on tweaking and tweaking and tweaking and tweaking and tweaking and stop arguing about the perfect answer. Because this is one of the reasons why there are these political arguments, because people say, well, I know the perfect answer, and so I want to have my perfect answer, not your perfect answer. And when we do this, it's going to be there forever. And I think that's just a bad way to manage capitalism. The better way to manage it is let's try this. Let's tweak it this way. If it's working out well, let's do some more of that. If it's not working so well, let's change directions. And we just don't have that dialogue at all.
Well, I love that you say stop viewing it like a perfectible machine.
Yes.
And more like a rainforest.
Yes.
Love that. So talk to us about how we can view it as a rainforest. And I mean, I really thought, like, I want to make the title of our little conversation today, like, view business like a rainforest, right? And so please tell me what you mean by that.
Sure. Well, I mean, in a rainforest, if you pull a lever, right? You say, we don't like that species. It's eating this other species. Let's figure out how to kill all of them, of that species. And you think that'll make the life of these other species so much better off, right? Chances are you're going to screw things up, in 10 ways that you had no idea you were doing. It's like the stories you've heard of the wolves being reintroduced to the parks out west and changing the flow of rivers, right? It's because in a system like that, a complex adaptive system like the Amazon jungle, it's just not possible to know what the effects are going to be of the changes you make. So therefore, you've got to do two things, I think. One, change modestly, right? I may be a sort of a, people think of me, I'm a big thinker and I want bold strategic moves. But the way to get to something is to think about making it better and better and better and better. And you're never done with little tweaks. And so if we were managing it like a rainforest, we'd be like the Amazon jungle. We would be making tweaks, not trying to say we've got a big problem and we're going to pull this gigantic lever and solve that problem. That just doesn't work that way. The human mind is not capable of doing that. Plus, what we know about every system is that there's adaptation, right? So back in the Clinton administration, the pension funds were really mad about executive compensation getting out of hand because the average executive was making $1 million a year. CEOs, imagine that, how horrible, $1 million a year. And so they passed legislation to fix the problem. There's only going to be $1 million of compensation deductible for corporate tax purposes, and that'll make sure that corporations don't pay more than that because it'll be really tax ineffective. And you're like, yay, we've done it, we've solved the problem, we've struck a blow. What happened? They just said, well, we got to find another way to pay them, so we'll give them stock options, right? And within less than 10 years, CEO compensation had gone up 10x. 10x, right? The problem was X. X was a really big crisis problem, and the fix got them 10x as the result. That's a classic example of adaptation. Is people figure out, the system just automatically figures out how to exploit the new rules, and that's why you've got to say, you know what? If that happens, we're just going to change them again. It's what happened.
I call it the unintended consequence of decisions, right? The intended consequence was, I want to reintroduce the wolves. I want to make sure that this town has water. I want to make sure executives are not overpaid. That was the goal, right? Yes. The unintended consequence is sort of the impact of that decision has to things that people never would have thought. I agree, Roger, that, people, listen, I sold for a living. Like, it was all about, how do I maximize my compensation plan, right? My quota, my commission, my et cetera. So I get that part of it. If they're not going to tell me that I'm going to get paid to sell this, I won't sell it. I'll sell this, right? So adapting in real time. But we're at this point right now where we almost don't know where we're adapting towards, right? Yes. I don't like the term new normal. I feel like the normal we left had lots of room for improvement, whether it be social injustices or pay or equality, et cetera. And so I know it's going to be the future. And so I've been calling it kind of the next future. And someone goes, well, that's the same thing. Next and future is the same thing. I go, yeah, new and normal, I don't like. So next is new. No, I'm with you. Yeah.
I'm with you. I guess I would like to believe that even though COVID has been horrible, it's killing 1 million people worldwide, 200,000 in the US. What we've got to do is say, what can we learn from this that will make us better? Because otherwise, in some sense, the people all died in vain. Wouldn't it be better if all of those people, looking down from heaven, would be saying, well, at least the world that I left got better by learning a few things from this. So I think your view and your approach is noble, and that's what we should hold ourselves to. If it's just getting back to where we were, it's like, well, we just had 1 million people die for nothing.
Right. I agree. Right. And it all kind of came to fruition for me. I've told this story often, but I think it brings it home. Like, I'm in Los Angeles, California. I'm 2 blocks from Hollywood, near all the major studios. And when this first hit and everything was shut down, I was going to the local drugstore, which was still open, and the Starbucks next door was closed, but the parking lot was packed. And I was very confused. Like, no one, Starbucks is closed, parking lot's packed, what's going on, right? And I was driving on my way out. Sure enough, it was multiple people sitting in cars because they were getting the free Wi-Fi from Starbucks.
Oh, interesting.
Right. And so there was something on the news the other day that there were kids sitting in front of the Taco Bell in Silicon Valley trying to get free Wi-Fi so that they could go to school, because, they relied on that infrastructure for all kinds of things. So, you and I could go on for hours about that. But, ultimately, I want to make sure that I give you an opportunity for everybody listening. What do you think the 1 or 2 things, not only go buy Roger's book and read Roger's book for sure, because, anything he puts out, I'm all over. But what would be the 1 or 2 things that you think you would leave with our listeners today around when more is not better?
Sure. Well, one would be just this personal thing. As it turns out, the behavior that many of us adopt, which is to fall in love with a given service, like Facebook for our news feed, or Amazon Prime for all the stuff we buy, or Uber to get around. When you as an individual commits 100% of your purchases to that, you are contributing to the Pareto economy, right? And so you can help out by doing one little thing, right? Which is just split up your purchases, right? So it doesn't even mean not using Uber most of the time, right? That's fine. Just don't use it all the time. Use Lyft some, use taxis some, use Amazon Prime some, go to your local store some. Get some of your news from Facebook and subscribe to your local newspaper. You will then create a more diverse and resilient economy, and you can do it, right? I know it's not the natural inclination. Natural inclination is to go and commit to one thing. So I would say it's a simple thing for any individual to do it. The other thing I would just say is politically, I'd say the following: don't allow politicians of whatever stripe to play the game that they've been playing over the last 40 or 50 years, which is to not ask anything of you, right? So they make promises. We encourage them to make promises, promise this, promise that, promise that, promise that, promise that, and then we'll vote for you. And then they can't fulfill their promises, and the reason is they can't do it by themselves, right? So it is much better. And I end the book. I try to stay as apolitical as possible in the book. But the guy who really brought this to the fore was Newt Gingrich with the contract with America, where he said, "You vote for us in Congress, and we'll do these 10 things for you." Personally, I like JFK better. Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. That's a balance. Now, I would say ask both. But having that view of saying to take this complex adaptive system and move it forward, everybody's going to have to contribute. And so if you just sit back and say somebody else is going to do it for me while I purchase 100% of my stuff from one supplier, you are going to create a world that you don't like. It's not going to be clear why that's happening to you. It just will be. So on, that's things that people can personally do. If you're a business leader, I would just say don't view Slack as an evil. Zero Slack is not the right number. W. Edwards Deming, the great total quality guy, who now gets, in some sense, people say I'm following him by ridding my system of Slack. He said the opposite. He said that there's a proper amount of Slack, and it is not zero. Educators, we've got to stop teaching certainty, right? Think about it. Think about your entire educational experience, Tiffany.
I don't remember it.
Well, let's do a thought experiment.
Sorry. That was my outside voice. Sorry.
Imagine you were taking the SAT. Remember the form of the SAT?
I remember that.
Okay, good. Remember the form of it? Every question had A, B, C, D, E, right, one of which was absolutely right, and 4 of which were absolutely wrong. The entire education system is around teaching certainty, teaching as if there's a certain right answer and the rest are wrong. That, last time I checked, is not the way the world works, right? There are better answers and worse answers, right? And that's what we should be teaching. We should be teaching that there are better answers. And even if you give a better answer and do the better thing, the system is going to adjust. And so you're going to have to figure out what's the next iteration of better, rather than it is your job to figure out what's right and what's wrong. So there are, and political leaders have, I think in politics, we've got to sunset every piece of legislation. To say this is good for 5 years, and then we're going to review it. And that way, all the people who make a living, there are lots of people who make a living out of gaming legislation, right? That's why we have $5 billion worth of money spent above board. Who knows how much is below board in political lobbying, right? And they just game the system. Here's where I like the NFL. The National Football League has got a competition committee, and at the end of every season, the competition committee meets and essentially says, did anybody figure out how to game the system too effectively? And if so, we're going to tweak the rules so that we create their form of resilience is offense and defense in good balance so that games are interesting, right? And so if somebody comes up with an offensive tweak, right, and you're on the West Coast, right, Bill Walsh with his famous West Coast offense figured out how to make the offense way more effective than it was before and more effective than the defense, right? And so the NFL said, you're a good guy and you're a smart coach. You're going to the Hall of Fame. You win Super Bowls, but that's not going to convince us that we're going to let you wreck our game. And so they made rule modifications. And
well, it's like Moneyball in baseball, right? It's like Moneyball in baseball, right? Same thing.
Absolutely. Tweak. Although the interesting thing, Tiffany, about baseball is baseball doesn't tweak. Baseball's only made 2 tweaks in the last 70 years. I
meant in the sense that, when Moneyball kind of came out and said, do we want to go for the best player or do we want to add things together? And then everyone replicated it, right?
Yes.
That was the advantage, right? The advantage was the process. And so, I think what I got from everything you just said is small pivots every day, watching that it's a living, breathing organism, and being really resilient is about being agile. But the most important thing is keep an eye on what your customers want, what your employees want. And if you can find a way, right, to create a space in your business where it is a platform for change in these times we're in, then I'm all for it. So Roger, it's been fantastic having this conversation with you. And to everybody, right? When More Is Not Better by Roger Martin, a dear friend, a mentor, a champion of mine. I thank you so much for spending time with us today on this episode of What's Next Live. So thank you, Roger.
Thank you so much for having me, Tiffany. It was lovely.